Next, let's talk about iterating over arrays. So to do this, we're going to use something called a loop. And a loop is a set of commands that will execute repeatedly until a specified condition is met. So if you can imagine a mouse running on a wheel, and the mouse is trained to repeat an action each time he makes one rotation. And before he starts each rotation, he checks if the condition is still true. When the condition ceases to be true any longer, in other words, when the condition becomes false, then the mouse will stop running. One such loop in JavaScript that we can use is called a for loop, and this repeats until a specific condition evaluates to false. So the basic syntax here for a for loop is we start off with the keyword for, and then inside of parentheses here, we can give an initial expression, okay? And then we will have a semicolon, and then we'll have a condition that will evaluate to true or false, followed by a semicolon. And then thirdly, we'll have something called an increment expression, which is the sort of number of times something should increment for each loop. And typically this is just setting the initial expression to increment by 1. And that's followed by curly braces with a statement that is to be repeated as long as this condition here inside of the parentheses in this section here is true. Okay, so let's take a look at an example of this. Let's create a variable called vegetables, and we're going to set it equal to the array broccolis, peas, and carrots. Okay, and then using our for loop here, we'll say for, and here we can see var I equals 0 is our initial expression, which is creating a variable which is I, which stands for increment, and this here is set to 0. So this will always start off counting at 0, and then we have a condition that it's going to evaluate each time it loops, and in this case it is as long as I is less than the length of the array. Okay, so here I'm calling the array itself vegetables, which we know has 1, 2, 3 elements, has a length of 3. Okay, so this essentially says as long as I is less than 3, we're going to I++. So this is the increment expression where we're saying that each time that this particular loop loops, each time the loop runs, we're going to increment I by 1. Okay, so the very first time here, we say 0 is less than 3, and that evaluates to true, right? Because again, var I is equal to 0, so I here is equal to 0. And it is less than the length of the vegetables, which is 1, 2, 3. We have a length of 3 here, so 0 is less than 3. This is a true statement, okay? So in this case, we're going to go ahead and run this script here, and then whatever is in the statement here in between the curly braces, we're going to run this one time, and we're going to increment I by 1. Okay, so this will actually say console log vegetables 0, okay? Because remember, I starts off being equal to 0. So what this is going to do is print in our console the value of the 0 index element, right? The element that has the position index number of 0. So here vegetables brackets 0 is going to give us the value broccolis. So literally the first time this loop runs, it's going to simply print the word broccoli into the console, okay? Then we're going to I++ or increment I by 1. This will add the number 1 onto I. And the second time around, I is now equal to 1, so it will say 1 is less than 3, which is the length of vegetables, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this is still true. So then it's going to say console log vegetables bracket 1, which is going to print the value peas in the console. Okay, then it increments I by 1, I++, and now I is equal to 2. So this time it's going to say 2 is less than 3, which is the length of vegetables, 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to print vegetables brackets 2 here, which is going to print the value carrots into the console. Okay, then I++, it will increment I one more time, and here now we have 3, I is equal to 3 now, so it'll say 3 is less than 3. Now that statement is false, because 3 is not less than 3, it's actually equal to 3. So in other words, we counted 0, 1, and 2, up to three times that we've looped here, and we've printed the index position 0, 1, and 2, writing the name of each element in the array, okay, into the console. And then when the array here, when I has been incremented to the same number of elements that are in the array, in other words, here we've printed or listed all of the items in the array, then this statement is no longer true, that I is less than the length of vegetables, and because it's false, this loop stops running. Okay, so this loop essentially will print broccolis, peas, carrots in the console, and then it will stop running.